120 miles in a storm.
Okay. Are they both launched from, via the P3?
They're both launched via the P3. I can always show a video. They come in a cylinder. The big drone is pressurized launch, so it goes in a cylinder. It sits in the A-sized sonobuoy chute where we release a lot of instruments out of. It's the bigger chute on the plane. Because it's pressurized, makes it somewhat easier in that when you release the drone, they just press a button, the pressure is released, and the drone comes flying out. The small drone is released unpressurized. So you open the chute, you can see the ocean below, and you throw it out. And the cylinder that contains the drone, well, the drone itself has a parachute on it. So the cylinder goes flying when the parachute deploys, and then the drone opens up and starts flying.
Okay. Well, what altitude do you prefer to launch it from?
So we launch typically, well, the P3 flies at either 10,000 or 8,000 feet. It really depends on if the Air Force is there or what other aircraft are in the vicinity. So we'll fly the P3 at 10,000 feet if we can, but the P3 always has to be the lowest aircraft as a deployment vehicle, besides for the drone. The drone loses about 1,500 feet on deployment, and so we typically start at 5,000 feet and below from a sampling perspective.
Okay. What are the readings you get from the instruments on the drone?
So we get all meteorological measurements. So we get winds, UV and W. They have the capability of measuring up to 100 hertz. So it uses a multi-hole pressure probe, which is a turbulence quality measurement device. So you can get really, really high response wind measurements. We haven't demonstrated that yet, but that's the ultimate goal capability-wise. And then we get temperature, humidity, pressure. When it gets really low, we get sea surface temperature via infrared sensor. It also has a laser altimeter on the bottom, so you can actually get wave height from the drone itself.
That's really nice. How low, once you get it down, what's the lowest level you like to operate with?
So in a storm, it's complicated because you don't know the wave heights necessarily, so you don't want to fly too low. But we can fly, I probably feel comfortable at 100 to 200 feet. It's risky, of course. You hit a big downdraft, the thing is only 3 pounds, right? It's gonna lose altitude pretty quickly if you hit a big downdraft. But in clear air in March, 2 years in a row, we've flown at 10 meters or 30 feet above the ocean for about 25 minutes.
And it uses that altimeter on board there to maintain the constant altitude above the water. Is that the idea?
Yeah, so it's actually really interesting in clear air because when it's at 10 meters and then you have the wingspan and then it's turning, so the altimeter reads 10 meters, but it's actually at an angle relative to the ocean. And so you figure the wing is probably like just about to touch the ocean, is what we're joking when it's
probably asking too much to have attitude autopilot on a device that size.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to believe, but it's 3 pounds, the small one. I mean it looks like a paper towel tube. I can show a picture at some point if you'd like, but because it's a brown cylinder basically, so it's 97% battery in terms of weight.
When it's launched, it doesn't look all that different from the dropson then, because that looks like a cardboard box.
Yeah, I mean it's bigger, so the cylinder looks like an AXBT or Ocean Expendable. Those are about 27 pounds. So it is bigger than a dropson from a deployment perspective, but yes, the actual instrument itself is small.
Yeah, so you need the cylinder so that it'll line up properly for the sonobuoy pressurization to pump it out, right?
Yeah, and you don't want it hitting the actual deployment tube as it's going out, and so it kind of protects it for a little bit. And the forces, I'm not an engineer, but I know the forces in that tube when you release out of the plane are very, very strong. There's a big suction force in there.
Yeah. Wow. So they're obviously expendable. You get one flight and it's kind of like the male praying mantis. It's gone after one flight, But what's it cost to build one of these?
Between 10 and 15,000 for the 3-pound drone. The big ones are considerably more expensive, but from a cost perspective, I mean, you get really valuable information. You can imagine flying around the eye wall in low levels and getting a distribution of wind speeds that's just not possible with any other instrument platform. So,
yeah, is there thought, is an ultimate goal of NOAA to having what evolves in this technology become part of the operational suite when they're flying recon?
Yeah, we're hoping so. There is a transition plan to, obtain and to make these operational. One of the things we want to do, for example, is have the ability to have multiple UAS in the air simultaneously. So that's like a 2025 goal. There's a lot of regulatory stuff that has to happen to make that a reality. But that's, again, one of the things we're hoping for.
Yeah, I guess with NOAA going over to the C-130s as the next generation of aircraft, when the P-3's lifetime is finished, the launching technology is similar. Is it on the C-130? I forgot.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, it's just a standard A-size sonobuoy chute, so everyone uses the same dimensions effectively for their instrument
Wow.
launches. So it should be this.
Now, you get the data back in real time, or oh wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, data comes back in real time. We're not at the point where we have sent it to NHC in real time, but that is a goal of this year.
Yeah, just post-process it with an analyzed version of the data so they can quickly ingest it into their diagnosis. Yeah.
Yeah, we plan on sending HD ops to the National Hurricane Center this year. That's a big goal of ours.
Wow, that's fascinating. Hal, jump right on in here. I can tell your brain is spinning on this.
Yeah, Josh, I had a question for you. Is the flight path and the details about the flight, is that all automated and pre-programmed, or can a controller in the plane or on the ground actually override that and basically steer it?
Both. So we have a predetermined flight plan. Of course, anyone that's flown into a hurricane knows that when you get there, it's not always as you expect, or things happen that you don't necessarily anticipate. And so there is the ability to override the flight plan for the UAS and then change on the fly. And we've done that, in certain circumstances.
Josh, another question. What's great about these innovations is sometimes it expands the science. You're pushing that boundary of science and discovering new things. What are some new kinds of insights scientifically you think that might be found by flying so low into tropical cyclones?
Absolutely. So that's how I got into this. Is I have a lot of scientific questions that just weren't answerable with the current instrument suite that we have. And so it was really enticing for me to get involved. And so, my background from my PhD is in air-sea interactions in hurricanes, or how the ocean transfers energy and moisture into the storms. And so you really need to fly low and get very high frequency measurements to really understand that process. And so I think we'll be able to really understand that turbulent exchange of momentum, heat, and moisture to the atmosphere from the ocean in a much better way. Other things we'll be able to understand is just general boundary layer evolution, whether that's from a wind and momentum perspective or a thermodynamic, temperature and moisture perspective. There's just so many questions we can answer.
Gosh, do you have a rough idea how many storms we've flown drones into now to collect data?
I want to say probably 5 or 6. There's been some iterations of the drone technology. So the first generation was the Coyote, and I wasn't involved with that necessarily in the building process. And now we have the 2 drones that we are deploying from the P3, the Altius 600, and then the S0 made by Black Swift Technologies.
And Josh, the last question. So that air-sea interaction, can that really differ from storm to storm? And what kind of characteristics of a tropical cyclone would make that air-sea interaction different?
Yeah, so the air-sea interactions depend on a lot of different variables: the wind speed near the ocean surface, the temperature of the atmosphere, the moisture of the atmosphere, and the sea surface temperature of the ocean. And so you really need all those measurements simultaneously to be able to tell what the air-sea interactions are. And frankly, there's just so much uncertainty. It's hard for me to say how they vary or what the variance is between the storms. We do it in what's called a bulk method, where you estimate the exchange of, say, moisture and heat near the ocean surface. But really, we want to do it from a direct turbulence perspective is the true way to do it. And that hasn't been done before.
It sounds like collecting all these data could really go into a lot of master's degree thesis and doctoral dissertations moving ahead to better understand this, right?
Yeah, that's our hope. I mean, our group is really, we love helping students and giving the data to students and having them run with it and spend all their time trying to figure out and mine the data for new scientific insights.
Thanks, Josh. Bill, back to you. Any other questions about this emerging technology?
Oh, I wrote down 3 or 4 while you were talking, but by chance, do you launch any AXBTs at the same time you're doing the drone to see what the subsurface ocean profile looks like?
Yeah, so currently that's only possible with the small drone because it's unpressurized. And so with the pressurized drone, the launcher takes up the tube. And so once you press the button, it's still in there for the entire flight. So with the small drone, we can still use that tube for other mechanisms, and we do launch AXBTs concurrently with them. We also try to get measurements with other instruments that are out there. I'm sure you've heard of the Sail drone. They're a very famous instrument platform. We try to co-locate with them when they're out there and stuff like that.
Do you go on the flights or someone from your group?
Yeah, so we do rotate. I mean, who goes on the flights? As a professor, I teach 3 courses, so sometimes it's hard to get out there. Last year, I flew in Hurricanes Lee and Nigel, but we also launched in Hurricane Tammy last year, and so I wasn't a part of that. Just wasn't possible.
Oh, good. I was wondering that answered the other question, is how you decide whether to go off the pre-programmed flight. Well, if you're already up there with it, you're intimately aware of the environment then. You mentioned Coyote. Do you have names for the ones you got now?
Yeah, so we have the Altius 600. It's made by Anduril. So that's the big drone. And then the small one is called the S0, made by Black Swift Technologies.
Great. All right. Yeah, the turbulence factor on that. Have you had enough data to see some results to get an understanding of how that turbulent layer is working over the ocean?
So we're getting there. So we just submitted a manuscript now for doing turbulence in clear air. So in those March missions where we were able to fly at 10 meters for about 25 minutes, depending on the flight. Actually, a student of mine is the one leading that work. And so we're getting there. It's very challenging to fly low in a hurricane, as you can imagine, with a 3-pound aircraft. And so we're learning about them and learning about flight patterns and different capabilities. Yeah,
50 years ago when I was flying in those with what we thought were old P3s back then, good grief, we would get down as low as 500 because we were testing out different types of altimeter radar and altimeters and sensors, remote sensing of the sea surface temperature, which were probably primitive by today's standards. But the visuals on the turbulence of the ocean, I can't imagine how hard it is to keep the drone aircraft from making contact with a wave. Have you had that happen to you before on this project?
Well, all of them have eventually made their way into the ocean. So
I mean, when you weren't expecting it to?
No, it hasn't happened when we weren't expecting it. We haven't really got to the point yet where we have flown them really low for an extended period of time in a hurricane. That is a goal of this year, and I do think we'll be able to accomplish that this year based on our advancements over the past 2 or 3 years. But we haven't got to that point yet. We are interested in other things, other scientific questions using the drone. So, for example, one of our goals has been to fly a full circle around an eye wall at 1 altitude. And the reason for that is the scientists that do data assimilation showed that the UAS measurements, or just being able to fly and get continuous data in an eye wall, can be really helpful for data assimilation perspective.
Capture some of the structure of the eddies and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. And just to get a full, view of the eye wall at one time is just very challenging to do. And of course, at a higher resolution than you would get from like radar on the P3 or something like that.
It's amazing. What's the airspeed you fly this at?
It's about 50 knots.
Wow, it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim, what you got?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, and maybe you said this at the beginning, I apologize, I was distracted for a moment, but real-time data beyond you guys in the airplane, is that available any place? Is that something, or after the fact, that others can go in and look at? And if I wanted to look at it, could I?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you could always email us and we could share it to you. I mean, typically we publish the data online as soon as we put the data into a publication for manuscript. But we're always looking for colleagues to look at the data and to collaborate with. We're hesitant to put data on in testing mode, to put it online in testing mode initially, just because you never know. We want to look at it carefully and make sure that the data is good and not reporting any issues. As you can imagine, getting accurate data on a moving aircraft can be complicated, and so we've gone through a few iterations of this where we've noticed challenges that we've been able to overcome in getting accurate measurements. So we don't want to put anything out there that's not reliable, right?
Makes sense. And in this expected to be very busy hurricane season, talk about the cost of these. Is the budget there to keep flying all season long? If we get into our 21, 22, 23 named storms, or at least half a dozen that are close to the coast that may have significant impact? Yeah,
we hope so. I mean, we have more drones this year than ever before available. We have 18 of the small ones and 4 of the big ones. So we have, I mean, to give you perspective, we flew like 2 or 3 last year. So we have a lot of, ability to fly this year in terms of hardware. And hopefully, the storms cooperate. One of the challenges with the big one, you think it's better because it has a 4-hour duration battery life, but it's hard to find 4 hours on station for a P3 mission. And so it's actually been one of our limiting factors where we're like, oh, we'll be on station for 2 hours because there's a long ferry. Well, we don't want to send it into the ocean with 2 hours of battery life remaining because that's a waste of money, right? And so that's actually been one of our challenges.
That's fascinating. I know this is a conversation, but do you have any pictures easy to get to that you can show us? Yeah, we didn't talk about that in advance, but if you have any,
I have it pulled up actually.
I'd love to see just a couple of
them. Do I just share my screen?
Share your screen.
Let's see here.
And I gather the aircraft has to maintain line of sight with the device to maintain communication.
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
There you go.
So you can see my screen?
Yes.
All right. So this is the big drone. This is the Altius 627-pound drone that flew in Hurricane Ian. To give you some perspective, this is the drone with the P3 from size perspective. Obviously, it's very small. This is the 3-pound drone. Remember I said it looked like a paper towel tube? I still think it does, but this is what it looks like when it's deployed. That's me holding it in the lobby of the building. I can show some other pictures here that look cool. This is the deployment tube for the pressurized drone. So this is what it looks like when it's in the tube, and this is sitting on the plane ready to be launched into the storm. So it sits in this hole right here. That's the A-sized hole where the drop-on chute is kind of cut off. It's right above it. That's the smaller hole. I can show a video of it being released. I think this is like the coolest thing. So in safe separation, they put a camera view on the side so you can see it come out of the plane here. So this is a side-looking view of the deployment.
Wow.
So the back wings start to stabilize it. And of course, eventually, because it's a wing-mounted camera, you lose the visual. See it flipping at the very end.
Very cool, though. Yeah.
That's incredible.
So,
Josh, do you have cameras on the drone, or are you just recording like instrument data, like meteorological data?
So we have not had cameras on the drone. One of the big drones this year, we are outfitting with a camera to record video. As you can imagine, the challenge there is bandwidth. So the P3 will have to stay very close, and we're working out those details currently with the P3 crew and just what the flight pattern would have to look like in order to make that feasible. But that is a plan for this year for the first time.
Amazing stuff. Well, thank you for sharing that. I love hearing all of that. And I think the emerging technologies are fascinating. So don't go anywhere. Stick around if you have time. We'd love for you to stick around for the second half of the hour as we continue the conversation. But let's take a break from what we're talking about now. And Bill, the tropics, I know you said earlier, a week ago, we were watching, one little wimpy storm in the Southern Gulf, but now things are starting to get interesting.
Yeah, wonder what that wimpy storm did in dollar damage with all the storm flooding. The beach replenishment alone goes into the millions of dollars.
Exactly. Yeah.
Storm, you know that more than I do, probably. Well, okay, let me share my screen and we'll, if I can find where I start. Oh, initially you'll just see the Zoom picture, but I'll get us over on what I want to talk about. There we go. Yesterday, the Nothing Brewing blossomed into two systems rather quickly, and we'll talk about each one of them. There's a 20% chance in the current outlook, out beyond 2 days, maybe before it reaches the Yucatan, and then maybe again in the Gulf. There's some inhibiting factors in the forecast data, namely wind shear, and I think proximity to land would also be a factor there. And then we have this disturbance that came off Africa yesterday or the day before, that both the GFS and the ECMWF, which are the only two I've had a chance to look at, have fairly similar characteristics in what they perceive as the future of this. I'm only going to talk about it out to the 7 days, just like NHC, because there's just not enough skill and something that hasn't even developed yet beyond that. Satellite imagery here. There's our disturbance, easterly wave, leaving the Eastern Caribbean, which is the burial ground for a lot of these. And, really doesn't look all that bad. There's a leading upper level trough here, and that generates some high level winds going this way. And you can see in the satellite that way. So there is an outflow pattern of sorts, probably a little dry air and wind shear below that level. And a lot of convection going on in there. This all looks interesting, and the ECMWF, a few of the members of the ensemble pick up on it, but it's just out to sea, and it's not that excited about it. Northeasters have been a lot worse than that this winter. And then off of here, east of the Cape Verdes, at a very far south latitude, is this disturbance that came off Africa. May even have a little bit of a low attached to the ITCZ down in that area. Generally trucking along to the west with a big high pressure to the north, providing the steering. Another way of looking at all the data that I try to show every time I'm doing this with everybody is I love this tropical tidbits merger of the imagery to capture generally our whole area of interest. And there's a couple of disturbances in the Eastern Pacific, none of which are in the outlook or expected to develop. Maybe we're going into the full-fledged La Nina type dearth of storms out there. And you can see there's quite a bit of moisture and convection centered over Central America and southern Mexico. So any dry air issues for this disturbance will have to be coming from the flow in the more northern part of the Caribbean and the Southwest Atlantic. Oops, missed slide. There we go. This is in Michael Lowry's Substack thing. Those of you that follow the tropics would be well advised to sign up to cover, he has a great way of expressing it, gives you some, especially if you're in the media, gives you some great language to use to describe complicated issues on many of these. But this is the record water anomalies right now. The whole segment of the Caribbean over to almost to the far eastern Atlantic is in record territory for the temperatures we have now. It's basically in a September mode already, and it's only coming up on the 1st of July. So don't be too surprised if we see waves that come off, even though they're still far south, that they have potential to develop this season. Here's let me make sure. Yeah, this is the Europeans ensemble in there, and this cluster of tracks is what it's producing for our current Caribbean wave over the next 10 days in the model run here. Let me back it off to where it must have updated on me. There's the 1 week version of it. This system will be done and gone, maybe give some welcome rain to far south Texas and eastern New Mexico, or eastern Mexico. In spite of the flooding they had, they've been in a serious drought, so I'm not sure they're done with that yet. And then here's all the ensemble members that that pick up on this system, develop it east of the islands, and maintain it out through 7 days. It gets kind of squirrely after that, but it's still there. I guess it has to update every time. Sorry about that. I thought I had it locked in. You get to follow what it does. Now you can see it's the GFS ensembles aren't as rambunctious with our current Caribbean system, but are fairly close to identical with what the European was showing with most of the members, maybe a little more intense than the ECMWF, but that's not surprising here. That tends to be a trend in those. Okay. Where was I? That's where I am. Pardon me, guys. I got to move this out of the way. Okay. Yeah, this was the close-up of the track. So that by Monday next week, we might have a system approaching the islands in the windwards and leewards. And with that, if anyone has some questions they have on the, or you guys have something to add to what we're discussing, love to hear it.
I just think we're ready for the door to shut on our region. All these little storms that keep going in just to our south and little disturbances that keep going in south of South Texas. Let's keep them away. But then we turn our attention. It's interesting to look at that. The one that we're watching now in the Atlantic could be a 4th of July storm or somebody in the Caribbean. Who knows where? But as we get into the holidays, that presents interesting issues. A lot of travelers.
Yeah, the longer term models show this building powerful dome of high pressure straddling most of the southern U.S. to maintain itself out beyond where I find it very reliable. But being summer, those tend to persist. So it looks like if there isn't a hole in the ridge out far to the east, that it would just keep coming west, and Central America, maybe the extreme southern Gulf. For future path of anything that's coming out of there now.
Nothing to suggest that the forecast is wrong in the overall forecast for the season. Right now, everything is pointing toward what the forecasts are calling for. Right? Do you pretty much concur?
Oh yeah, whether we stay in the ENSO neutral or quickly migrate into La Nina in the peak of the season is not that much of a difference. In fact, for Texas, we've had more significant hurricanes make landfall in the neutral phase than we've had in the La Nina phase since 1950. So I'm almost in the mode, hey, let's get into La Nina real quick.
We call the neutral La Nada, the nothing. So,
Bill, a quick question. Oh, it's Tim, just another quick question for Bill. I know the National Weather Service Houston Galveston office has been mentioning Saharan dust coming through the Gulf possibly this weekend. Bill, is that something you look at, or is that really a minor influence?
Oh, I look at it, and it's not. It tends to correlate real well with stable, dry air, higher wind speeds to low levels pulling off of Africa. That's why it lifted the dust, and all of that tends to be somewhat anathema to development, at least in the the eastern half of, say, the tropical Atlantic. Maybe after it gets into the Caribbean, it becomes, if it's still persisting all the way across to here, maybe more indicative of the stable weather pattern, preventing convective mixing and getting the dust out of the layer anyway. So dust is our friend, apparently.
Thanks, Bill.
And Hal, if a storm does threaten, you've got an interesting product that you were testing. Take it away with your GeoTrack update and this product that could be beneficial for some, for many.
Yeah, for sure. So, recently I did a podcast, GeoTrack podcast number 73, from flood victim to innovator, Rahel Abraham and ClimaGuard. So ClimaGuard is basically this waterproof bag that you can zip around a vehicle or around any valuable. So if you're evacuating and you have a favorite grand piano or an art collection that you don't want to get damaged by floodwater, you can zip that up in a ClimaGuard bag. Well, the fine folks at ClimaGuard gave me a free bag last year and said, we know you're always out in floods and hurricanes. When you're out there, if you can deploy one of these, we'd love to get some field work to prove how well our product works. So last week with Tropical Storm Alberto pushing a lot of salt water up to the upper Texas coast where I live, our GeoTrek team was on the ground, and we actually found someone that lives in a very flood-prone area, one of the most flood-prone communities in the U.S. We actually found this woman named Doris that was really excited that we were going to flood-proof her car. So we were able to zip her car up, and she took pictures really throughout the storm. None of the pictures actually show the highest water, but I was back at Doris's place yesterday evening, and she said the water did get up to where it would have come in her vehicle, but ClimaGuard kept it dry. So you can go to just do a web search for ClimaGuard. Again, this is a flood-proof bag that you can use to zip up your vehicle or valuables, anything like that. In some of these flood-prone communities that could flood even multiple times per year, something like this can be really valuable. As far as I know, last year, the price of this was only $400. That's cheaper than your deductible on your flooded out car. And then all the stress, if your community gets flooded, it's very stressful then to buy a new vehicle, because a lot of the vehicle inventories in your area may also be flood damaged, and you may not notice that. So it was really cool to get on the ground and actually test this out. With GeoTrek, we're always telling stories about extreme weather and natural disasters not covered by the mainstream media. We forecast the weather, we document it, but where possible, we also like to get on the ground and test out these products that can mitigate flood and wind damage.
That's fascinating. And some of the pictures were being shown while you were talking about it. I'd love to get them on the show sometime as well. It'd be fun to let them come on and kind of show off a little bit. Great stuff, Al. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
All right, now it's time to move on to our next guest and how you got the intro for that. And let's see where you're going. Take it away, Al.
Yeah, fantastic. Great show today. We're just covering so much different science. Our next guest is Dr. Samuel Lillo. He's a meteorologist and software engineer that has developed deep learning techniques to improve hurricane forecasting. It's called semantic segmenting, and it identifies atmospheric signals of a tropical storm by labeling and categorizing each pixel. It then provides parameters such as hourly wind, precipitation, and storm surge. Dr. Lillo works for DTN. Dr. Lillo, thanks so much for joining us this morning on NTWC Plus.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're so excited to learn about these innovations that you're doing. Could you tell us a little bit more about semantic segmenting and this innovation that you're involved with?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So the semantic segmentation is really addressing specifically the precipitation side of the tropical cyclone. That's really is kind of the most difficult part for us to handle, to create a deterministic forecast for the tropical cyclone from all these different models, where you have all these different locations, right, of the storm as well. And so what the semantic segmentation does is identifies each pixel of the grid that's associated with the tropical cyclone, and then we have these different models that are weighted, also weighted spatially, and then recenter the models and kind of merge everything back together into our one deterministic forecast for the storm.
Yeah, Dr. Samuel, so when you talk about these pixels, does the spatial resolution of them, does that change depending on the storm, depending on the model, or is that pretty much fixed?
It depends on the model, yeah. But then we merge it all back into our one global grid, which is on a 10th degree grid.
Oh, that's really interesting. So does this enable you to kind of get in at zoom in a bit on different parts of a tropical cyclone?
It definitely helps us add a lot more detail, again, deterministically, out at medium and longer ranges, when otherwise, ensemble mean, for example, is going to be all blurred out. You might even have multiple centers showing up in the ensemble blend. And in this case, we're able to get the best possible deterministic forecast. Obviously, there's benefits to having the ensemble characteristics of representing uncertainty in the forecast, but it's very useful still to be able to provide a deterministic forecast that has the magnitudes that are more representative of the storm, right? So when you're averaging, day 5, day 6, you're blurring out the total magnitude of the storm, and a forecast might be looking at, okay, well, sure, we're looking at half an inch to an inch of rain or something like that. But when we are taking the individual models and merging them together, recentering, and we are able to retain that magnitude of the storm. And so, all right, 10, 15 inches of rain, coming your way with this particular system. And it's really important to be able to demonstrate.
Are you really merging and combining different models, or are you using this technique to just kind of focus in on different iterations or ensembles of one model?
Both. So we have timeline ensembles as well, looking back at previous runs, but we're pulling in all available model data that's available to us. GFS, Canadian, ECMWF, HWRF. So really just everything that's available to us. We have some other sophisticated weighting that's separate from the semantic segmentation. Semantic segmentation is really just for the image processing itself. Then there's a random forest that's employed for the weighting of these different models that is scaled based on performance and location and intensity. We apply those weights and then merge everything back together.
Dr. Lillo, as you're working there at DTN, who do you partner with and collaborate with to move these innovations forward?
I mean, a lot of this is in-house. We do a lot of work with AWS. They support us on many levels. And then also a lot of, so our weighting of these different models is based on National Hurricane Center forecasts. We don't aim to necessarily have different forecasts from the National Hurricane Center because, we don't want conflicting messages. We don't want, we don't necessarily want to compete. We want to add value. And so that's what we're aiming to do. We're aiming to add value on top of the official forecasts.
The output from these deep learning techniques, are they available publicly? Are there websites where we could see what the models are crunching, or is this more like behind the scenes and we wouldn't necessarily see it?
Right, so those individual numbers are behind the scenes. We are also working on employing ForecastNet and GraphCast, these two AI models that have really gotten a lot of traction, a lot of attention in the last several months. And those, I think, will end up being a little bit more public-facing over the next several months. But what we put out is we put out our official global gridded forecasts, and then also a separate tropical cyclone package that, again, employs all of this technology.
Even though Bill Reed is enjoying a dew point of 13 degrees this morning, while my dew point is 80, I'm going to let go of my bitterness and pass the mic back over to him for some questions. Oh, I think you're muted. I'm sorry.
They're vacuuming here. That's why I put it on mute. But yeah, it's dry out here. I feel like putting lotion on my gill slits. But how long have you been working on this technique at DTN?
I joined DTN about 2 years ago, and maybe a year and 364 days. Wow. I think I hopped on the team, and this was something that we were already facing the challenge of representing these tropical cyclones deterministically in an ensemble blend forecast engine, and I kind of just hopped on it, and it was pretty exciting work, and I'm really excited to continue working on it today to advance, and excited to talk to you guys about it.
Yeah, I find it very exciting because I had the same. You mentioned exactly the disillusionment I've had with AIs too far, as these smoothed out looking.
Yeah, exactly.
Even in the short range, I said, that's not real. That's not the way the storm works. So I'm excited. Are you able to go back and rerun, say, a significant event?
Yes, that's extremely important to me, to be able to do these reforecasts.
Okay, I'd dearly love to hear what your technique did with Harvey and the rainfall.
I had to run Harvey, but so one thing that this does help out a lot with is that rapid intensification towards landfall in the medium range forecasts. So for example, not Harvey, but Lee last year. Lee was forecasted really well across the board, but we were able to capture that extreme to historic rapid intensification days in advance, which, that's something that even just like 5 years ago, that's an amazing accomplishment. And so Harvey, yes, we were able to capture that rapid intensification up to landfall very well. Also, the semantic segmentation, again, helps to have a more realistic amplitude of those precipitation amounts, which is so important. When you have, again, the ensemble diverging and smoothing out the precipitation, like you're not capturing the actual magnitude of this event. And that's so important to do, especially in situations like Harvey and Florence. I'm totally amazed about the rapid intensification. In 2008, when we were coming up with the hurricane forecast improvement
project, we did looked at the verification of a 24-hour forecast of RI, and it was like 1 in 10. So
Oh, yeah.
by
Yeah.
medium range, you're talking, say, days 2 and 3,
Right. Medium range, we're looking at like 3 to 5.
3 to 5. That's
Yeah.
incredibly important because with the big urban areas with so many people at risk of storm surge, 24 hours is too late.
Exactly.
Realistically,
Yeah.
5 days is probably the wheelhouse right now for executing those plans. Wow.
And that's why we care about getting these advanced forecasts out. One other thing that we're able to do with this technology is put out these forecasts as soon as we have an invest. Really, as soon as we have model guidance that's keying in on the center of any storm. One thing that I love about tropical cyclones and tropical waves is that even though they're incredibly complex features, obviously, but we're able to boil them down into like these 10 numbers. And so as soon as they're trackable, as soon as we have a center on it, we put out forecasts. And so, for example, with Hurricane Hillary last year, with Idalia, we were able to get forecasts out about 2-3 days in advance of the official tropical depression, advisories being issued. And that's so important. Like, an extra day, even in those situations when you're talking about, especially the cases of rapid mystification up to landfall, so important for preparation.
Yeah. So, if I understood what you said at the first there, a critical element you need to run this is to have a defined center in the disturbance. So an open way.
Really, it just needs to be identified. As soon as we have a label on it, as soon as we have an invest label, we have forecasts on it.
So basically you'll have a pick a point as the best centroid for the easterly wave out of NHC.
Yeah.
The hurricane models, and you can take that and run with it.
And obviously, there are situations where we don't even have an invest on it, but there's a disturbance that's close to land, and that's where we have excellent human forecasters still behind the scenes at DTN. That's if we have something that's non-tropical but really just on the edge and hasn't been labeled yet, it's really important to still have those human forecasters there to put out something. Okay,
so it does well with the non-traditional tropical cyclones. Somewhere in the spectrum of cyclones, they're more hybridy.
As soon as it moves into some sort of hybrid, subtropical classification, then yeah, it does well. The stuff that's like really on the edge, that's like, all right, this is extratropical, but there's a chance. We don't use it quite then. That's more for the human forecasters to take a hold of.
Yeah. So I know this is a tropical thing, but I cut my teeth on nor'easters. Is this technique workable within the extratropical cyclone mode?
Oh, I get this question every time, honestly, and it's definitely something that we're going to be pursuing over the next year. It would definitely be very helpful for, again, capturing the magnitude of these storms when you're talking about 3 to 5 to 7 days out, when, again, things are blurred out, but it's really important to capture the magnitude of these systems. So yeah, there's definitely something that's on the to-do list.
Yeah, the Northeast corridors, infrastructure intense that they need that kind of time, and really the magnitude could really be a game changer for how they prep it.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tim, what you got?
I'm just, and looking at things, I assume this is DTN proprietary stuff that if I want to hear what's going on, what you're seeing, it'll come through DTN and through clients to make it available to the public.
Yeah, so it is proprietary, and it's facing patent approval as well. And so right now, what's public facing is really just, our outputted forecast grids, and then the tropical cyclone products themselves, which include wind, precip, storm surge, et cetera. Working on even tying in tornadoes as well.
Interesting. Just the next step forward in the private forecasting industry that really is a huge step toward understanding on the bigger scale.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I'm really, so happy that I get to work on this.
That's terrific. That's terrific. I don't have any questions coming in from online right now, so if you guys got any more, go ahead. We got about 5 minutes left. So, Hal, you want to jump back in?
Dr. Lillo, you had mentioned
Sure.
that semantic segmenting can help with precipitation forecasts. Sometimes structurally in a tropical cyclone, we see an incredible amount of banding, especially to the right of the eye, which can really jack up those precipitation totals. Can this method really work with predicting if that type of banding is going to occur and where that might occur?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Because again, with banding situations, even slight displacements in those bands averaged out across a bunch of models, and you just have this, blurred out image with no detail. But we're able to identify, okay, these bands are associated with tropical cyclone, and we position them on top of each other to really emphasize the structure of these bands. And like you said, yeah, in this quadrant of the cyclone, it's so important to be able to emphasize the magnitude here rather than just wash it all away.
So let's say a hurricane was going to make landfall midday, and by say 4 a.m. you see a lot of the banding develop. What's the time frame? Could the model ingest those data and even by say mid-morning have some pretty detailed precipitation forecasts?
Yes, absolutely. And again, even so, sure, definitely as things are developing, if we have a changing forecast in the short term, it'll, we're ingesting the models in real time, and it will update those precipitation depictions in real time. So both short-term developments, but also, again, even the ability to take these mid to long-range forecasts and have those details, even at landfall. I think that's really important to be able to show.
Bill, over to you. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think I've pretty well watched those. You actually asked the one I was going to ask about the resolution and precipitation forecasting, both in time and space. So that's all.
Yeah, so we have hourly resolution to our forecast, about 10th degree grid resolution. We are working on nowcasting initiative as well. That'll get down to 10 minutes. But yeah, right now, hourly forecast out to 7 days for the tropical cyclone package.
Hey, Dr. Samuel, another question. I mean, we tend to get, like a season like this, we're expecting a lot of named storms in the Gulf, in the Atlantic Basin. But a question, would you ever use data from other basins, like from the Western Pacific, from the Indian Ocean, from Australia and Oceania? Can you obtain data from those other basins to help basically increase your sample size? Or with this work, is it really focused on the Atlantic Basin only?
No, this is applied globally. So we're running this, over the winter in the Southern Hemisphere as well. So this is all applied globally. And yeah, it's really helpful for us to be able to ingest all of this historical data and real-time data for the tropical cyclones. However, the training is actually, it is regional. Certain models perform better in certain regions of the globe. And so it's important to be able to capture that as well. But yeah, no, so the product itself, though, is available globally.
So I'm a kindergartner when it comes to modeling as far as my intelligence in it. But one of the questions I have is, how does the deep learning react to changes being made internally in the modeling? So GFS or ECMWF will come out with a significant change, say, to their model. Does that affect your deep learning?
Oh, no, that's an excellent question. So we retrain this on an annual basis. So for example, I rolled this out for the first time last year, and this spring reran the training for all the, any updates to the models or any newly available models too, for the HAFS A and B models as well. We're incorporating those in as well. So yeah, we retrain this regularly. No, great question.
We did get an online question real quickly about how often the model's initialized and how many runs a day does it do. And then after that, I want to bring Dr. Wadler in if you get any questions before we wrap up for you. So go ahead. Initialization and how often is it run?
Sure. Another great question. So this is running in real time. So basically, as soon as there is data available, it ingests the newly available data. We issue new forecasts every hour. But yeah, so basically, as soon as there is any data available at all, we're updating with it.
Terrific. Dr. Wadler, you've been sitting quietly for a little while. Do you have anything you want to add to this half of the conversation, or any questions you have for Dr. Lillo?
No, I think it was really interesting conversation, and it's just, really cool, the new frontier that's being made with AI and deep learning algorithms on forecasts. It'd be really interesting to see where it goes.
Well, we can't wait to simulate some of your data too.
There you go.
There's some great work that you're doing, and it's nice to meet another sooner.
Absolutely.
Terrific, gentlemen. Thank you. Terrific stuff today. It's interesting as you look back. You go back 10 years trying to do a program like this, and imagine what we're talking about today is just remarkable, just absolutely remarkable. And you guys are at the forefront of that. And so thank you for your time, your passion, your energy, and for spending some of it with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Of course.
Hal, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I just, Tim, what you said, I mean, the innovations we're seeing today would not have even been possible 10 years ago. It's just amazing with communication of weather, with detection and forecasting. Just the advancements are happening so quickly. Really great to have you guys on the show and to learn about these latest innovations that you're both very much a part of.
Terrific. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, but wonderful sessions. Technology is just fascinating. But something that came out of this last hour that shouldn't be passed off on is that an old Aggie can have a cordial conversation with two swimmers over a space.
Really.
That might be the biggest accomplishment of the whole hour. Yeah.
Gentlemen, thank you all so very much. And of course, the latest technology is Zoom that allows us to do this, and all the websites allow us to do it as well. So guys, thank you all. Great program today. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for spending time with us this morning. I want to thank our sponsors who make this a possibility each and every week. USAA, the South Padre Island Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Weather Company, Weather Boy, Weather Call, and of course, our folks at Black Magic Design. We appreciate that. Don't forget, we're in person in April of 2025, South Padre Island. Start making plans now to join us in person for the National Tropical Weather Conference in 2025. That's it for today. We'll see you next week with another edition of NTWC Plus.